Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is Double Bits Workshop. So in today's video we will be doing an unboxing, an initial review and presentation of the 5-inch variable speed hook and loop random orbit sander by DeWALT. So full disclosure here, this is a gift that was given to me for Christmas from my mother-in-law. And I'm very grateful and very excited about it. Up to this point, before I got this sander, I have been using the DeWALT oscillating sander. It's a little basic square one. This is usually one of the more cheap models that you can get, based on the fact that you can also get pretty much anywhere flat sheets of sandpaper, and then you just tear those pieces of sandpaper to fit this little square or slightly kind of rectangle. As you can see, this thing has had a heck of a life. It was used when I got it and I've absolutely beat the dickens out of it, and I've been needing an upgrade. The motor sounds really tired and I've just absolutely put hundreds and hundreds of hours on this thing. This sander in particular is the model D26441 oscillating, just basic sander, and it has been an absolute champ. The switch is starting to go out as well. There are parts I can use to replace this, and I'm not getting rid of this by any means, but I am looking at this sander in particular as my upgrade for my everyday use. It seems to be commonplace for a lot of other YouTubers and just basic woodworking and just craftsmen in general that use the oscillator for their basic primary sander. There's all sorts of different things you can do with it, and it's a lot easier to just slap on one piece of sandpaper, utilize it and use it, and swap it out super quick and easy using the hook and loop method that these have on them. Versus, as you've probably seen in numerous videos of mine, how long it takes to quickly tear down a piece of sandpaper, put it on here. You have these two little latches on either side that you have to open up, and you latch it in, and then you're back to sanding again. So there is delay in between having to swap it out unless you pre-tear a bunch of paper before you go into your project. Knowing how much you're going to need is always kind of hit or miss. Also hitting your angles certain ways if you're rounding corners on stuff, trying to just smooth it out. You're going to have a lot of potential mishap with this unit versus with this little guy here. Being a random orbit sander makes it a lot easier consistently spinning to where it's using all parts of the disc, versus on this one in particular it's just slightly jittering. So I'm going to get, as you can see, these heavy lines in the sander itself from where I rest that board heavy right in the center of it or angled on it. So this in turn should be a better option for me. So without further ado, let's get on to the unboxing. Now I have opened the box and glanced in just to make sure nothing was damaged or broke, but I actually have not turned this unit on yet. So we'll kind of go over what you see when you open the box. So once you tear open or cut open the box, you're immediately met with the instruction manual. As with most DeWALT tools, or tools in general it seems nowadays, it gives you kind of a good general amount of information. This one I'm not a super fan of in regards to it's one of these styles. So it is a little annoying because you have to unfold the whole dang thing in order to read one section that you might actually need reference to. So it gives you a basic understanding and information with some diagrams on how to mount, use, and also how to set up a dust collection system on the back of it. Going over it, it gives you some of the basic information that I found very common in most, any, and all DeWALT tools, where it tells you what the amperage rating is of the tool. So this tool in general is a 120 volt. Check here. Same as what the box says. So it is a 120 volt tool, 3 amps, and it orbits in either 8,000 to 12,000 RPMs. The diameter of it is 332 inches or 2.6 millimeter. or 3/32, better known as, better way of saying it as well. The pad type on here is a hook and loop system. There's a couple different models, so this is the hook and loop system, and this is also model number DWE6423K, just in case you're curious. So continuing on, once we've kind of looked over a few little bits of information, you can also find the required sandpaper, which does not come in the kit. I had to go out and purchase some. On the 5-inch, it is an 8-hole pattern, whether it is PSA or hook and loop. And then it shows the different types of models offered by DeWALT that utilize that 5-inch hook and loop, as well as the PSA setup. Continuing on through the box, as you can see here, we have our little dust collection tube, says DeWALT. Similar as to the oscillating sander. You get a nice nifty little basic bag. Also says DeWALT. Nice kind of big emblem on there that's sewn on there. And then you get the sander itself. So it has a little piece of cardboard on it and a little cellophane bag. Like I said, I opened it up just to see that there was no damage, and I haven't done anything else with this yet. Still got that brand new tool smell. So as you can see on here, stiff, not super loose or beaten up by any means. Nice hook and loop, brand new. 8 holes on the bottom. As it said in the instructions when I glanced over them, was just kind of looking through. You have your little DeWALT catcher here. So you can just push that in, latches on, and you have a little twist, and that locks in place. So there it kind of just locks in place, but you can, at a moment's notice, kind of pop it off. There's a little inset on the inside of the tube that latches on to a piece of spring steel. So that way if you need to, in a moment's notice, kind of give it a little twist, yank it off, push it on, give it a little bit of a twist and a little pressure forward, and it'll pop back on place. But it's not coming off unless you make it come off. Switch is night and day in comparison to the old beat up one. So this feels a little bit more stiff, but at that same rate, it would also consistently just lightly kind of pop out. So every now and again I'd have to re-push the switch down, start sanding, get to sanding a little bit, and then to pop out again, you could hear it drop down in RPMs. This feels like a more solid click, but the switch is definitely a little bit easier to toggle, also brand new. Handle feels really nice. The ergonomics are very similar to the oscillating sander, and the profile of it is very similar as well. So looking right at the two tools next to each other, this little random orbit is slightly wider all the way around than this guy here. But as with a square versus a circle, you're missing your corners, so this will be great on all surface area, but it's not going to be amazing at getting corners, sadly. Alright, so kind of what I've lined out today, past just kind of going over those basic specs for you. Kind of glance over the box here. So just like you, if you're at the store and you have hands on the box, and sometimes at Home Depot or Lowe's you just have the tool in front of you, but you only have just a little placard sometimes, or even just a price tag letting you know, hey, here's the tool and here's the price of it. So we'll kind of go over what the box itself looks like, since you don't always have the ability to get hands-on with the tool itself to look over the box. So looking at the box lets you know that it's guaranteed tough, as most any DeWALT tool will always say. It comes with the bag. You get a picture of the tool itself. On here it says 5 inches or 127 millimeter variable speed hook and loop random orbit sander kit. Also has it in a couple other select languages. Same to be said on this side. This one is manufactured in 2021, looks like November from what the date stamp says here. On the back side you'll have your voltage. As I said earlier, this is a 120 volt tool, as well as 3 amps on it. So that lets you know exactly what the requirements are for this. So if you're ending up trying to use this on a generator, you need to have a generator that outputs at 120 volts consistent with 3 amps as your actual amperage for the tools in use. On here it also says orbits a minute. So instead of RPMs, like I said earlier, it's actually orbits per minute. Is either 8,000 at its low end to 12,000 at its high end when you allow it to go away from the work and go into full RPM, full high-end kick-in, is only going to max out at 12,000 RPMs. So this isn't like a grinder just going absolutely crazy at like 36,000 RPMs or any of those variable high-speed ones. The orbit diameter of the tool is 3/32 or 2.5 millimeters. And that is all for the actual box information. I do like these little bags, or kind of little satchels, that you get with most of the tools. Has a nice sewn in, I don't know if you can quite see it too well over there, kind of a sewn in thicker chunk of cardboard or something in the bottom here that is actually sewn in to be a little bit more durable and help keep the bag open, so it's not a floppy just kind of bag that ends up kind of meshing in one spot or another. This is actually going to hold and house the tool very nicely, and with a couple select pieces of sandpaper if you so wish, depending on what job sites you're going to, or if you're helping a friend out, or just if you want to store this with its sandpaper and you don't plan on having gobs and gobs of sandpaper. It is a nice little case. And it's pretty straightforward. It is kind of squishable, so if you had to shove this into a toolbox, or if you had to shove this into another bag, another tool bag of some kind like that, to bring it to a job site, or if you have the nice end of your truck with the toolboxes on it, this can conform to kind of help fit around to the other tools and supplies you might be bringing out to the job site, which is super nice. And like I said, if it is something that's going to be home use, you can definitely set it up on a shelf, contort it around some of the other tools you have. As you know, with me, space is absolutely at a premium, so it is nice to have something that kind of contorts. I've had the DeWALT hard cases. They're nice, but only if you have the room for them. 9 times out of 10, any friends, family, my brother, or anyone else that gets a hard case usually ends up taking the tool out of the hard case, and they want to store it in the hard case, but at that same facet, most of the time you end up with the case off to the side and the tool in use somewhere, and it eventually gets sat up on the shelf with a cord wrapped around it. And then you have your toolbox somewhere else, and then you're kind of constantly questioning, do I keep it, do I not? Having a soft case is nice because I can stuff 10 of these little bags into another bag and then just hang that bag in the corner. I can dig through it and pull a bag out if I need to take this tool somewhere, or if I want to supply having it on the tool when I'm feeling like keeping my whole work area and space nice and clean. And these are also nice dust bags. I say that because as woodworkers, we all know that dust gets on everything and in everything. And there's nothing more annoying than trying to do a couple projects, and then when you're trying to clean up, move things around, or grab a tool for the next thing that you're working on, and it's just absolutely coated in dust. I've had a few tools fall out of my hand based on it being too dusted, to where when I grab it there's just no friction and I can't hold on to it. I've also had in the other instance where, like in a sander for instance, when you turn these on, there's a spinning motor to oscillate and or create the random effect for the Orbit sander. So you're constantly having a fan that kicks on to help cool down the motor, but it's also blowing. So if this thing's covered in sand, or it's covered in kind of dirt, dust, grime, what have you, you turn it on, you're going to have a face full, and if you have a small confined space, you're going to have that fill that space with just all sorts of dust particles. So it's always good to have any kind of respiration that you can come up with, whether it's just a basic mask, or if it actually has any kind of filters on it, or if you have dust collection going. That is absolutely key in using any and all sanding products. Kind of goes without saying, but something that's worth noting if this is going to be your first sander that you get, which this one I'd say could be your first sander, and it could be your last sander, or it could be just the next sander. This will fit in all those categories, and we'll kind of go over some of the things here on a few different pieces of material as well. So let me grab that sandpaper. Since, like I said, it didn't come with it, I had to run down to Walmart and pick some up. Alright, so here is the sandpaper that I went and got at Walmart. This can also be purchased online and a couple other select stores. This is Gator brand. I purchased the value pack so that way I could have the most general sizes. You have your 60 grit, 80 grit, 120 grit, and then you also have your 220 grit. So this isn't going to be 300, 600, or 800 grit by any means, but this is what your more general purpose, I need to quickly round a corner, or I need to just drop down the grade of this board. This is going to be what you're going to see in most general construction sites, or you're also going to see this in a lot of home setups in different types of houses, or if you have a shop of your own. These are going to be the more general types of grit that you will have at your disposal. So I figured I'd pick this up to kind of give a scaling grade of not only the sandpaper itself and how the grits handle and work, but also that way you just kind of get a general feel of the sander itself, because this is probably going to be the first pack that most people are going to buy with the sander itself. Now that's one thing I forgot to go over. What you'll find this tool going for on average is around $85 on the high end, Otherwise, this can be as cheap as $69.99 if you go through Home Depot when they're on sale. And there are a couple different sales that can drop this down as low as $65 with a coupon, as well as if it's on just a certain clearance or near Black Friday sale. You can get this toolkit for around that price. Otherwise, plan for on average around $85 or $84.99 before tax for this tool with the bag, no sandpaper. The sandpaper packet, as of right now here in January of 2022, cost me $13 and I think 45 cents before tax. So plan for around 15 bucks for a package of sandpaper like this, which gives you 24 pads in the 4 different flavors, if you will, or just the 4 different grits. So figured I should cover that basis real quick for this tool. So I'm going to do some time lapses of sanding, so that way you don't have to hear the wonderful annoying sound of the sander. I will turn it on beforehand, so that way you can get kind of an auditorial here of what this tool sounds like brand new, without any issues, defects, or problems, just turning it on and letting you hear at full decibel what that sounds like. Yes, the cord that they have is kind of its standard 6-foot length. It is nice, and it's a definite thicker cord. It's not going to be the kind of perforated cord that you feel with some of the cheaper, like $15 to $20 power tools from Walmart for their Hyper Tough, where it ends up having like a corrugation on the outside of the cord that collects dust. It's annoying to me. I don't like those as much. This is actually going to be a nice smooth, but it's going to be more of a matte finish, so it's not going to be like rubber that super attracts dirt and grime, but it's also not going to be such high gloss that it's going to reflect light and seem just ultra cheap. This is actually nice, durable, more on the better quality of rubber that doesn't collect dust side, and like I said, it's more of a matte finish for the cord. Little things, but it's those touches, you know. Definitely enjoy that. Like I said, it's about 6-foot cord. I'm 5'10", so the cord is just a little bit longer than my arm span, so I know it's about 6 foot. So as you can see, Sandpaper has in the back here P60, P80, P220, and we also got our P120. So I'm going to start off first sanding with some P60 grit. I'll bring out the shop vac here in just a second. But with it being hook and loop, what you want to do, since these already have holes on them, is you just want to line these holes up with the tool itself. Another feature I enjoy about this sander versus your basic oscillating sander is that this does have holes similar, but because you're using just a general sheet of sandpaper, what you end up getting with this tool when you purchase it brand new, this one, since I got it at a yard sale, did not have this tool, is it almost looks like a golfer's cleat, where it just has a bunch of spikes kicking up from the bottom that is meant for you to be able to puncture the sandpaper. So as that fan is oscillating, creating this to vibrate and move, cooling down the motor, it's also creating a wind tunnel effect to blow the sand and dirt, dust, whatever you're sanding off, into this little capture bag that has a spring on the inside of it. Same as this one. So that's what the design is meant to do on this unit. But like me, if you purchase this secondhand or you end up losing the tool, any sandpaper you put on here will negate having those holes. Now when you purchase the hook and loop Orbit sander little discs here, they will usually, if not always, come with the holes in them, or there's a couple of different brands that you can purchase that is all just a flat mesh, so that way it gives you a lot more surface area. You don't have to think about it to line those holes up, but it is nice that I don't have to think about puncturing the holes like I have to do with the oscillator on this random Orbit sander. All I have to do is just look at it and kind of place them. And once you get in the groove of it, I've used these before, I just haven't had one. They do kind of plop into place pretty nicely. And I don't have to like over secure it, I don't have to latch anything, as long as I kind of line it up. Slap a thumb down, push down with it. As soon as I start sanding and apply pressure, the hook and loop will engage even more. So I can even just lightly put these on. Start sanding right away. So let me grab my extension cord real quick and we can hear what this sounds like just getting turned on. One of the other awesome features that I really like about this sander so far, just looking it over, is on the side here you have a variable speed dial. So for my initial testing and everything, I'm just going to kind of speed run through on the highest setting, so that way I can kind of test it out at the highest RPMs. But if you're doing something a little more technical or want to take your time with it, you can adjust this down to all the way down to 1. So we'll kind of give a quick listen on that for you. So the first speed, nice and slow. Second speed, third speed, fourth, fifth, and that's it. So that was the speeds going from 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And there is multiple clicks in there, so that way you can kind of get in between the speeds as well. And this, like I said a moment ago, is an 8,000 to 12,000 RPM or orbits per minute, since this is the Orbital sander. So just kind of a quick coverage on it. Like I said, I'm going to keep this in the high speed and just see what I can get out of the sandpaper. So you can use the lower speeds if you're trying to just slowly kind of drop the layers, and it will work really good for that as well. So with the random orbit sander, what it is doing is not just spinning at those 8,000 and 12,000 RPMs. The unit itself is also gyrating back and forth ever so slightly and spinning. So, as you can see looking at it, it's creating more of a wobble effect rather than just a flat spin like crazy. So you're getting a little bit of the benefits of the oscillating sander, as well as you're also getting the benefits of the spinning in a circle. It's just kind of going around in a pseudo circle that's just kind of wobbled out. So that way you're getting your same kind of pattern you do by hand, as well as you're getting the circle effect without causing just straight grooved circles from the sander. That's one of the benefits I really enjoy about these sanders, and why so many others do as well. Alright, so I have some different varying types of material that you yourself might be potentially sanding. So I have a more rough, dirty, and kind of grimy chunk of a 2x4 that has actually been burnished on one side, and it has a staple in it. I'm leaving that in for the purpose of if you did have any kind of foreign material. My primary item that I love to work with and use is pallet wood, and as we all know, pallets usually tend to be a little bit more grungy, beat up, and dirty, as well as a bit more of a rough cut, quickly thrown together so that way it can transport materials across the United States, the world in general. So they will usually have some kind of foreign debris, or they're going to have some kind of nails and stuff. A lot of pallets are torn apart and re-put back together, so you have chunks of nails, barbs from nails, staples, screws, what have you. So I'm going to leave that in so that way it kind of gives a test of just running over for the sandpaper, as well as how the unit itself works. It's not going to stop or anything, but it just kind of gives you an idea. So that's one of the pieces of material I'm going to be working with. Another one is I have planed these boards on either side. This goes to an Adirondack chair that I got from a bar. It was actually one of those kind of bar and grill places. They had them in back, got rid of them for free. I was going to try to refinish it. It still has peeling, falling apart paint on either side of the board, as well as the top. So I'm going to get a kind of feel for working with the paint on it. So that kind of tests out the sander as well as it tests out the sandpaper to see how well it works. That's why I'm keeping this around 60 grit. I'm probably going to start with this guy. I also have the stringers from one of the pallets that I have in back. So this is what you're going to see. Has the marking on the side to signifying where it's from, country of origin, if this is chemically treated, heat treated, what have you in that regard. And they usually have just a little bit of kind of like residual sawdust on it from the manufacturer. It usually sticks with them very well. So there is kind of a gridded on bit of just sawdust on these, as well as they are very rough cut and ran through with all sorts of different types of just quickly cut it so a forklift can get into it. That's what this is for the actual forks of a forklift to get through underneath and lift the pallet of however much weight they end up putting on it or building it for. So I've got two of those boards. I'm going to kind of test that out a little bit. I got just your basic stringer 2x4, a bit more of a standard 2x4, and then I also have OSB. Reason being is there's all sorts of DIY projects that people love to utilize OSB for, which what OSB is is random fragments and chunks of other pieces of cut down timber and wood, kind of just wood chippered, and then they end up cutting them all super flat and they glue them all together into a flat board. So it's just large shrapnel chunks of different cut off, peel off chunks of wood for other parts of production that they flatten into their own type of board. Now on here, again, I have some different staples on the corner. I'm going to sand over a few, I might pull a couple, just depends. It has been spray painted on one side, so you'll be able to kind of see the effect of sandpaper going over it. Pretty straightforward. I also have a long chunk, so that way we can see different ways and swaths I'm going to do to see how the grades of the sandpaper work with the unit, as well as the brand itself, in case you're questioning one or the other. So those are going to be my primary pieces of material. I also do have a board that has some nails in it. I will knock those nails out from a pallet, and I'll just do a kind of rough over sand. I have a piece of square stock, similar situation. It has red spray paint on it, so we're going to sand that off. A few of the edges are very rough, have lots of splinters. I'm going to try to sand those off as well. I have dust collection set up with my rigid shop vac. That's why I'm going to swap over to a time lapse before I start sanding, so that way you don't have to have that cringy effect of having that go off. I'll have my ear protection on. I'll have dust collection going so I don't have to worry about a respirator. I will throw on some safety glasses so I don't get any foreign debris into my eyes. And on that note, let's get to sanding. Alright, so needless to say, that took no time whatsoever. So here's kind of a beforehand. Trying to have that focus there for you. So it's kind of hard to see, but it was like a dark brown color is what was on here originally. So there's the original dark brown, what it looked like beforehand. It's on there pretty good except for on the edges. On the edges, it kind of is flaking a little bit, as you can see here. So it's flaky, but then this is really on there. Like good spot. This might have not gotten cleaned beforehand, or just dirt and grime got underneath the paint. These had sat outside as soon as they were built for the location that I got them from, of the bar and grill. So this is what it was beforehand. Like I said, I did plane both sides of this and get most of that off, which did kind of kill my planer blades, I'll say. So I used the 60 grit sandpaper, and let's see. Look at that. It took me like 30 seconds. I have also on one of these already used the oscillating sander and was on it for like 5 to 6 minutes for one board, and it took forever. So this is a solid win for how quickly this went. So there's a little bit of a dark spot right there. I could have gone there for like a second longer. And I rounded the edges. This board is kind of splitting apart and older. Like I said, these are outside and they just had paint thrown on them, so a rough life. I can maybe kind of cut this down, mend the wood a bit, keep it from cracking anymore. But I sanded a thick layer of paint off of that and on the bottom here. And like, look at that. That was a 60 grit. So yes, a more aggressive grit. But now what I'm going to do with this board is I will finish it all the way through using the grits, but I'm going to jump to the next grit, which would be the 80 grit, and use it on here as well. So we're testing the next setup against paint. Alright, so I got a little overzealous there, a little overexcited. The unit works amazing. I am really in love with this thing now. So I started with utilizing the 60 grit on one side, which was on this side here. It's a little rough, a little bit of paint left over, just kind of lightly hit it. And then I worked my way into the 80 grit, which you can kind of see up here a bit. Definitely a lot smoother, a lot nicer. Now I will say I started having too much fun with that 220 and I worked my way over and then stopped myself. But on this side here, this is the 120, and as I went kind of just up in number for the sandpaper and it making a more fine, smooth surface, what ended up happening is it took longer to get through the paint, as well as I had to apply more pressure, which is the general principle behind it. If you need to quickly get through something, you drop numbers so that way you have a more rough grit to create ripping off more material with each kind of cut or swath that you end up doing, going back and forth with the sander. And ultimately, this was just using the 220. Didn't take as much longer as I thought, but I definitely had to apply quite a bit more pressure to get this end result. And I haven't even touched the top to give you kind of an idea of what a before and after looked like for it. And I can tell you, not that you have the ability to, this is super soft. And this is what just the planer did. And then if you flip it over, you can see there's a couple areas that are lightly raised that I still need to go over, where the blades were getting so hot that it was actually starting to warm up the wood and starting to cause some of this to delam and the layers of the wood kind of peeling up a little bit. Since each one of these are meant to be, when it's a living tree, kind of expand to pull moisture up and through it. But you can just see in how shiny it is, how smooth this is from that 220, which is to be expected for 220, but how quickly I got this is quite phenomenal. And here's just down the way on the board a little bit. Kind of hard to see, but it's not as, it's kind of dingy in the light, but it's also a bit more of a rough feel and look, kind of smooth in some spots, just going from the planer. And I also have these raised up spots right there. That's definitely, as you can kind of hear, there's a catch point there. That's a splinter waiting to happen. And those ones really suck because there's an undisclosed amount of material, depending on what grain orientation is under that. That could be a thicker or smaller splinter that can either lacerate or kind of slightly deglove your finger a little bit. If you're just running your hand over it and not thinking, you catch that, it'll either go into the skin or it can do some serious damage. So these are some of the things that we're sanding down and why you always want to sand your projects when you're done with them. But as you can see, quick, not too much pressure. I still had a little bit of paint left over for the 80 grit, or for the 60 grit rather, and then up into the 80 grit, flip over, 120 on this side. It gets into the ultra smooth, kind of silky 220. That took not that much longer on just straight paint to this right here. So now we're gonna end up sanding down this 2x4. Same kind of thing, I'm gonna hit it on all four sides. So one side 60, one side 80, flip over. I'm gonna do one side 120, one side 220. This got kind of a bit more of the dirt and debris on this side. This is gonna be a little bit more smooth, but it also does have some of that same dirt and debris. You can see kind of a fresh cut through the 2x4 to kind of give an idea. All right, so to start off with, this is the 60 grit side, and I'm using the same piece all the way through. So there was a staple here. It actually got sanded so thin that there's the leftover shrapnel from the top of it. And there's another staple right there that was heavily hammered into the board, and it has gotten shiny, but no damage to the sandpaper. A little bit heat up, so it's gotten a little kind of floppy, but nothing bad. A little bit of dirt and dust on the backside of it, but look how little there is of sawdust in each of those little pieces of sand. And this is still heavily gritty, which is so nice. And how thick and heavy duty these are with the adhesive has beat out any of the normal sandpaper that I have up to this point. So moving on to the next side, this is the 80 grit. It did a very good job. In fact, I actually kind of enjoyed how quickly the 80 grit took away the lettering, made this smooth over the 60. I was also going through a little bit more of a dirt and grime spot, and I was hitting those staples a little bit more heavily to see what would happen if I would just kind of polish around them over, but I didn't think it would just sand right through them, which is nice. That flat board on there has not a really squishy pad in it. It's slightly squishy, but it's not overly like my other oscillating sander off to the side over here, where it's just kind of thick-ish foam that wears down and allows you to kind of press in and work around contours, versus this one can kind of just do a full-on sand and get everything down to a really nice grit quickly. Flipping the board over, this side here is the 120, kind of what a fresh cut versus what it looked like before. Can kind of show you with the staple too. on the 120. And then moving over here, you can immediately see that kind of kick up. This is the 220, which is absolutely smooth. This looks a little rough because there's deviations in the wood from the saw that originally cut this as a very rough cut 2x4. As you can kind of tell and see, it's definitely had some bored holes and just a general overall rough life. And there you have the fresh cut, kind of give you an idea. The burnishing and some drilled wood holes, like just drilled into the wood itself. Some big hole right there, a crack, versus that 220. So that's what it looks like on a 2x4 that's been lightly burnished and just beat up in general with staples. All right, so moving right along from the 2x4, the next piece of material I'm going to sand up. We're going to jump right into the OSB. So on here, same kind of principle, but I'm going to do it all on one side, flip it over and do all of it on the other side as well. So I'm just going to section this off into 4 sections, lay it down, and I'm going to use one of each of the 4 sanding pads that I've already used up to this point. So keep in mind, as I'm testing each of these, they're also the same piece that's been used from the first one all the way till now. And same kind of thing, just lining up each of these holes, just doing a couple of slaps and going right at it. Alrighty, so kind of looking at the board here, this is a chunk of OSB that was spray painted on one side, and it has spent a couple winters outside in the snow. It's been rained on, a few different things. It's holding up pretty decent. It hasn't super expanded or anything, but I wanted to sand down some of the surface areas. I use these as shelves. I've used these for a lot of things in my garage. It's still a decent piece of OSB, but it has had, we'll say, intermittent. I haven't just absolutely soaked this in a puddle or a lake or anything like that. Nothing super extreme. So in the top corner here, at the roughest setup, is the 60 grit. So you can kind of see from the shine here a little bit. This side is the most rough, and I felt like the grit of the 60 was doing a good job of grabbing and removing any large debris, but it wasn't actually getting into any of the contours, and it was trying to drop the whole surface area down a grade, but it was trying to just more or less grab large chunks of material and remove them. It wasn't actually giving an overall general smooth sand. I had to work at this for a while to get it to this. I'll say it was a change of pace for the 80 grit, because I found on that one it did both. It kind of removed a lot of the material, but it was also giving me more of a smooth finish in a faster pace, and I was seeing a lot more of the spray paint end up on the actual pad itself pretty quickly, which it is kind of hard to tell because the pads are already kind of red hued, but this has gotten a little bit more of a red hue to it because of the spray paint. Moving right along, on this side here, as you can kind of see in the light, up here, this is all the 120 grit. It's quite a bit smoother in between. I could use a little bit more pressure. I had a little bit more finesse. I kind of use 120 a lot in my projects because I ended up getting 2 large packages of it at a yard sale for $1 a piece. So I had a vat of it to work through. And I will say now, after 2 years of these projects every single week, if not multiple times a week, I'm finally working through with my oscillating sander most of those sheets, and I'm down to just about nothing. So I'm really happy with the new sander, plus also just the new avenues of it, because I've given over 2 years, 2 years to the channel, and well over 2 years of actually having that oscillating sander and working through multiple projects that weren't on film. So there's the 120, tried and true, and then down just below it is the 220. Now this is buttery smooth. I will say it took a second longer to kind of drop any of these levels or layers down, but as an overall, it was able to quickly smooth everything down like a 220 should, to try to get everything very nice and very smooth quickly. So I feel there's a purpose for each of these sand grits, a little bit more so as it is in general. Of course, there's reasons for every grit of sandpaper, but you can kind of feel it through the levels. So as you should with most sanding, if you have a rough piece of material, start out with your 60, drop it down to your 80, move to your 120, hit everything and do any of your finishing and your re-leveling on it, and then drop it to the finish of the 220. Because this, just hitting it, just straight raw material of whatever it is, and just hitting it with the 220 does create an overall effect that is nice and smooth overall and very nice texture, so if you did want to be tactile and touch and grab this board right off the bat, you could hit it with the 220, but you're not going to lose the definition. So based on the project that you're going for, or whatever kind of thing you're working on that has maybe a lot of texture, but you don't want to completely obliterate that texture, you can just hit it with the 220 and not have to worry about losing all that texture. Just like you see in this OSB board, all these varying little divots, lines, and kind of little caverns around here that it's not able to get into because of how the sander works. So that's kind of a quick overview for the OSB. All right, so now that we've gone and done a couple of different, in particular, boards, as far as just a mild, not super hard, and not pine or anything like that, piece of material, which was the backrest for the Adirondack chair for taking off the paint. We've worked with the 2x4 that has had dirt and debris off of it being a pallet. It's just a rough piece of material, something you might have had knocking around in the backyard. It got dirty at some point. You're working, or you're looking to work on a project that's using what you have at your hand. It's not necessarily like you're going right out to Home Depot or Lowe's or a lumber yard and buying fresh, brand new lumber by any means. You're grabbing something that you have, but you want to try to make it nice. This is doing a great job of that so far. For my purposes, it's going to be great. Continuing on, same thing with the OSB right here. It worked really good to drop down valleys. It's taken a lot of the paint off. It's left a little bit, so if you want that aesthetic, that's great. I could continue with each one of these layers and just continue to sand it down to where it's a little bit more like the blonde side in the back here. Same principle. If I had the blonde side and this wasn't going to be seen, I could do a light sand so that way I don't just have dirt, splinters, debris of any kind. I can hit this the same way I did this side, work my way through those same 4 layers. Like I said, this is more what your general craftsman or woodworker would have at his disposal. He would grab, or she would grab, the variety pack. That's just a value, something cheap. Work your way through the levels, see what you need. If you really need to go to 220, or if you're just going to leave it off to the side, get something sanded, and you're working around with just kind of a general tools and just for general purposes. Or if you're a general contractor trying to do some mild finish work, but you don't need anything super crazy like 600 or 800 grit, just working quick, doing piecework on the weekend, this is a great system for you. And like I said, if you got it on sale, $65 for the sander, just saying, great value so far. And I'm really loving how well this little guy works. And after all the sanding, there is the most faint, mild amount of heat in the dead center of it. It is not roasting, it doesn't cook my hand in any regard. I am in a heated garage, so that way I'm able to temperature control this system set up a little bit better. And this is one of the situations and areas that you're going to see a general basic person working on material. They're going to be working in a garage, they're going to be working in their house, they're going to be working in mild weather, it's dry, nothing super crazy right now, just a standard test. And after all that sanding, there's some red kind of kicking through, a little bit of red dust on the outside that I can just kind of brush off from the OSB. Now what we'll be working with is something smaller with a whole bunch of curves and contours as far as just wrapping around. Not too many curves rather, but we're just going to try to round over. So this was originally a 2x4 that was split in half to make a shelf. And same principle, as a red spray paint, we're going to try to take that off. We're going to round some of these 90-degree rough corners that have a few potential hand splinters, a couple very potential hand splinters, and then it also has a very rough cut and the softer cut on this side. So we're going to try to smooth this up and make this something usable using all 4 of the sand discs at once to try to drop this whole thing down into one functioning piece of material. So we're going to work through all 4 layers. So this is now as smooth and as soft as a baseball bat before it gets any kind of clear coat or oil on it. And it has some finite dust that can get wiped off. But to give you kind of an idea, so there it is all nice. Here it is before I did anything to it. So I kind of lightly hit this side a bit more than I intended to, so actually pretty heavy. But to give you kind of an idea, this is all the natural, what was grimy, splintery garbage wood. And then right there it just changes. And I went a little heavy with my corners, but I was just having a little too much fun playing around with it and just trying to get it all super smooth. But if I had taken some time, I could have turned this into a baseball bat handle or something, like an axe handle or goodness knows what. And this is just a straight cut with a chop saw. So that's nothing special, it's just a basic straight cut with that. So it's a little rough, could have been sanded, could have rounded the corners, but I also wanted to have this as just usable stock. So this kind of helped out in that regard too. And you can see just how rough and nasty this was before I got at it. So that's just those 3 levels of sandpaper, and I wish we were able to kind of give an actual tactile feel and see how well this material has turned out. I don't see any red hue to it. It is super shiny, and I haven't oiled it or done anything to it. It's just the natural wood when it's this smooth and dusted. Just looks really nice. It feels amazing. And I'm super stoked for something that's just a basic little, you can almost call kit of the value pack of sandpaper that just gives you 4 grades of sandpaper. And the results speak for themselves. So I'm also going to go through real quick on this palette board. So you can see here it's not terrible, but there's definitely some rough spots. Some broken spots where the nail's mounted in the center. I'm not sure what this wood is, but it has a really interesting grain pattern to it. So I'm going to sand that up using the same method, going through with the 4 different discs, not changing them out. These are still just the same 4 discs, and let's see what this looks like. So I love this system in the regards to the sandpaper with this sander in particular. This sander is an absolute beast. So what I did was, for this board in particular, the last board that I did, I went through these 4 pads of sandpaper, which I had already used, as you saw earlier, on these pieces of material to my side. The one that I didn't use was this stringer, but I more or less just got distracted by this one. So I didn't want to take up all of your guys' time. So this is what remains of the 60 grit. This is what remains of the 80 grit. There's still quite a bit on the outside. I started utilizing this center a little too heavy with the corners. This is the 120. The outside perimeter started getting more damaged than the center. Center was getting close. And then finally the 220, which looks rough right now, but I can still utilize a technique on this one using an eraser to remove all of the dust out of it. There's a couple different other methods, but pretty much just kind of a soft material like a rubber or something will also work similar. And those are the 4 that I ended up utilizing on this piece of wood, which for all intents and purposes, it has a large cracks on either end. It has a cup, a bow, and a twist throughout the board, but it just has so much character and looks awesome. I feel like this is something in its current condition with the rounded edges and everything that I could throw 2 basic L brackets or some kind of cool shelving kind of brackets underneath either side of this, and it would be perfect for a bar or something to put shot glasses on, or have a couple of decanters, a couple bottles of whiskey, tequila, what have you. And then you can even put a little LED strip in the back of it, and it would just be a wonderful light accent, some kind of cool old bar, and it all came from just a slab of pallet wood. And I don't even know what kind of material this is, but it's definitely a hardwood, and this thing is solid. That's part of the reason it took so long and so much effort with these 4 sanding discs to get it the way it is now, but I could have gotten a little bit better on it, but I actually wanted to leave some of the gouges and twists and cuts in the wood to give it that characteristic look, but I rounded the corners so that way you can see that grain pattern, as you'll see in the kind of like pan over of it. So that's that board using these 4 pads. Doing the same method as you saw earlier, I did this piece. You saw how rough and kind of laden with the splinters into what would be a nice baseball bat handle type, super smooth, super nice. Going through just those 4 pads, and then you see the varying types of sanding with the staples, so on and so forth, as well as I did the same thing for the OSB with spray paint on it. So I feel like those 4 should give you a good example of it. I feel like this tool is perfect for pretty much anyone. And like I said earlier, I kind of didn't explain it too well. You twist and it does have a lock, and then this pops off, and that little guy has room in the center, but it definitely has the same thickness of this plastic here, so about 1/4 inch all the way around this tube of sawdust. So this definitely collected a lot better than my other oscillator did, mainly because I didn't have the actual puncture to get the holes in it. But this motor is a lot stronger than that one. That one is wore down, I'll give it that. But even still, out of the 2, a general all-around purpose one for this little oscillating sander, yes, all around general purpose, this isn't a bad one. And these go on sale, you can get them at yard sales. Like I said, I got this one for, I think it was $50, and I talked the guy down to like $45 or $48. So less than $50 is what I originally got this used DeWALT oscillating sander for, and it has done me so good. But I will say, if I had a choice of the matter between the 2, price wasn't a question, everything was laid out in front of me, I think I'd go for this guy. I see why there is such an appeal for so many different YouTubers and woodworkers in general that jump right to this. Because of that circular and also just random kind of bumping action that this has, I don't feel that I'm getting super like when you're using a car buffer and you can buff in circles into your paint. You could do that, but you almost have to work to make that happen. This guy just did everything it needed to, has an absolute mirror finish. Any swirls that are on this board in particular is pretty much what was there from the saws that cut the board. And that was just what I left for characteristic. Otherwise, looking on the other material, I can't find any swirl effect. With the oscillator, it's consistently just doing a circle for this little guy. It's just oscillating in a circle as a square pad. So you get the little cursive E's all over the place. If you're not careful, or if you hold it and kind of try to go slow, you get these deep grooved E's that a lot of people know if they've played around with those before. So you kind of got to work against that, and it works against you to get the project done. So you're kind of fighting it. That's basically it. You're just fighting it the entire time with this guy, and I've learned to utilize it. It's been my primary sander pretty much from the get-go. I have belt sanders, but I usually reach for that guy, and he does an insane job. It is a square, so it gets in the corners better. You will run into issues with this being a circle that you can't get into a corner of a box, let's say, or any kind of corner on the inside of something. you're going to have a hard time with this guy, and you're going to have to hand sand if this was your only sander. If this was your only sander though, for how much all the time you would save on the outside of whatever material you're working with, I would almost be more than willing to sacrifice and get a block of wood and a flat piece of sandpaper and go out those corners on the inside of a box. Because that does such a dang good job. I would end up with so much more time on my hands than I would with a basic oscillator. I see it and I get it, and I hope you guys do as well through the video and my presentation of such. And like I said, these gaiters, it's a very basic brand. You can get these online. I think Lowe's has them, as well as I got these at Walmart. So it's very basic, very easy to get. You can order them through walmart.com, have them shipped to your location as well. The value pack, 24 of them for basically 14 bucks, since it's just under 14, is a great deal. And I utilized all 4 just to get a mirror finish and a really nice product. If I had done that on any one of these and it didn't have as much resaw mark from being pallet wood, it would have come out absolutely perfect. And as always, I always say that this is a wonderful product as well. The Howard Butcher Block Conditioner, suggested by a friend. I absolutely swear by it. I'm almost out, need to go buy more. But it's basically just a 50-50 of natural oil and beeswax. Wonderful product. Brings out that natural shine. I don't have to worry about this moving anymore. I don't have to worry about the cracks continuing on unless I screw through it or put a heavy amount of strain on it. But since this is such an insane hardwood, I don't think I have to worry about that. If you have any idea in the comments what this material is, just based on its grain pattern, feel free to let me know. I'm more than happy. If you have any questions on the tool itself or the sanding discs or anything that I did here in the video, feel free to leave that in a comment down below. Thank you all so very much for watching. Hopefully this has given you an idea on if you want to purchase one of these 2 tools, or if you enjoy the ideas of this tool in general, or the sanding disc. I'd like to know. If you like it, leave a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification. Thank you all so very much, and have yourself a wonderful day.